Hey everyone, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting and publisher at Autonomy Global. It is a great month, everybody. We are in July. We are celebrating global ops thanks to our month sponsor, Fixar. By the way, a Latvian company that's opened up a US presence. And today we have with us someone from the land down under in Australia who's also working in the North American market. So great to have with us today David Cole of FlyFreely, who I just met at Exponential a couple months ago. And he is going strong. So it's great to have you on the show, David.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Great to be here from the future in Australia, given our time zone differences. It's already tomorrow.
I love that. Back to the future. And we're gonna have David talk about himself for a minute. But fun fact, David was at our Law Tech Connect workshop and came up to me and said, "Hi, this is who I am. This is what I do." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, you have a cool accent. Are you from Australia?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh my gosh, we just had someone drop out of our global drone regs panel from that was going to speak about Australian regs. Can you do it?" And he did. And so, what a trooper. We love this guy. And here he is again. So, David, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so originally from Northern Australia. My background is I'm a mechanical engineer, so I was working in the primary industries in that part of the world of the sort of the mining, agriculture, energy sectors. So working in those areas back in 2013, saw these things called drones. I thought they looked pretty cool, could do some interesting things. So we started a drone services company in Australia back then. So we're doing lots of work for various people in those sort of sectors. And then we had the sort of challenges of managing and scaling our own operations. We were doing that all sort of manually at the time, pen and paper, spreadsheets, emails, um, and struggling with that. So we started building our own software platform to solve that problem. Um, and then we started having people come to us saying, "Can we use that?" So then we switched the whole company away from providing services into building software to essentially help other drone operators around the world.
Well, that's a great segue to tell us a little bit about Fly Freely. Now, started out as a drone service provider, now primarily software. But can you kind of give us that 30-second elevator pitch about what the company is and does?
Yeah, so we provide a drone management platform. So really trying to help any sort of organization that wants to start using drones, scaling up their usage, and then eventually sustaining their usage over time with the tools they need to make everything, simple, safe, compliant, as least amount of headaches as possible. So
And
yeah,
it sounds like you and your co-founder created this literally from the mines, if you will, from working in the mines, from working in energy, and a lot of those lessons learned that you then put into this software. As they say, a picture paints a thousand words, and I think we have a really cool video that talks a little bit about the company. So let's go ahead and roll tape.
Professional drone operators face many challenges today. With constantly changing regulations, compliance and company protocols leaves you spending too much time in paperwork and not enough in the air. Introducing FlyFreely, the all-in-one drone management platform that automates your operations and compliance. FlyFreely enables you to plan, execute and reconcile missions with ease using a web-based platform and mobile app. Plan missions with ease using up-to-date airspace, ground, aerodrome and NOTAM information all in one place. Execute operations and capture flight logs across all remote pilots, equipment and missions. No matter the aircraft type and operation, FlyFreely enables you to customize forms, checklists and workflows to suit your operational requirements for all industries and applications. It even works offline in the most remote locations. For the easiest and fastest way to increase the efficiency of your operations, head to flyfreely.io to get started today.
All right, super cool. Born out of necessity. There you were with your colleagues toiling away with your drones and your pens and papers and emails, and you realize, hey, wait a minute, this can be done easier and better. Let's find a way. So, what were the pain points that you noticed in the industry that you set out to solve in creating Fly Freely?
Yeah, so the really the primary one that we came across is just the amount of variety and variation that occurs when performing UAS operations. Now that can be everything from, different drones have different requirements, different sites you go to. So going to different customers and different sites, you need a specific risk assessment on this one, but a different one over here. Um, and then when you start to do things internationally, you've got a whole nother set of regulations you need to deal with in those different countries. So I really set about to build something that was incredibly flexible, that could deal with all these kind of potential variations that inevitably happen once you sort of start to grow your drone program. And then not only just handling that variation, then making it super simple for the pilots to actually do what they need to do and do it correctly, really efficiently. Because what we find is if it's not easy for the pilots, it just won't happen. So, you can build all these awesome systems, and then if it's not, it's too hard to use, then it won't happen. And then you start to have problems occurring around rework and crashes and things of that nature, which you obviously want to try and eliminate.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned crashes and safety comes to mind, right? In other words, this isn't just about convenience or even efficiency or compliance. Safety is a big part of what you built baked into this software. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the compliance is, we call it the ticket to entry, right? So that gives you your authority to operate. You've got to be compliant. And as I mentioned, that can vary via country and it can vary by which site you're on. So that's kind of the starting point. But from there, it becomes really about how do you turn your drone program into something that supports the business. So, and not working against it, i.e., you know, you're not losing a drone every week and then you lose the capability, right? This is one of the things we see, and it's one of the biggest problems that arises. Um, is yeah, you lose that capability and then you have to revert back to traditional methods, which are quite time consuming, and defeats the purpose of sort of having drones in the first place. So that's typically the things we start to see.
All right. Now, you focus on all different kinds of stakeholders with this software. I know you focus on kind of the managers and the asset owners in one aspect, and you also focus on the pilots or the operators. But there's a lot of people out there, David, that are looking to start a drone business. When you build a UAS program, how have you kind of built a system around building a program?
Yeah, so we've worked with literally hundreds of companies now, and even gone through this journey ourselves of building a program. Um, so that we've sort of made some observations and sort of grouped it into sort of 5 stages that organizations will go through. So there's that, the typical starting out phase. You've got some drones that you're trying to figure out how does, you know, this capability deliver value to the business. Typically, once you figure that out, you'll start increasing the number of operations. But what happens at this point, typically, is it's slightly uncontrolled. So you have people doing operations all over the place. There's sort of no systems in place. You start having crashes, rework, and then all of a sudden, you start asking the questions. Hang on, this isn't as easy as what we thought. Um, and you start trying to really understand the industry. And this is generally where people, for the first time, realize they're in the aviation industry when they start um, using drones, and it's actually a little bit more complicated. So trying to seek the knowledge from experienced people, coming to Dawn of Autonomy, trying to understand, what are people doing, how does it work, et cetera, et cetera. And then from there, they sort of move into the 3 stages we call standardizing, scaling, and sustaining. And that's really where we can start to chip in and make a difference and help them out.
Well, that's great. So and I think that standardize, scale, sustain are really the point where someone is growing their business. In other words, they started out, they might have made some mistakes, they sought that knowledge, and now they're in it for real. And this, I think you called it, David, when we were speaking earlier,
Mm.
the drone program life cycle, those 3 stages, if you will. So let's dive a little bit more deeply into each one of those facets and how FlyFreely supports those. So first, standardizing operations. I know one of the core aspects of standardization is you have to set minimum competency requirements, standard operating procedures or SOPs. How does FlyFreely help a person or that has a business manage all of that?
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. So, as the name implies, it's getting some basic standards in place. So, we sort of tackled this problem by building what we call our authority system. So, what is an authority? Well, it can kind of be anything. Typically, it's regulatory, but it could be sort of company specific. And what that kind of describes is, the UAS, the pilots that are authorized to operate under that authority, and the conditions that apply to that. So, for example, you want to perform Part 107 operations, you need a Part 107 license, right? That's that at the very simplest level.
Yes.
And what you'll tend to find is then when you start to get into more advanced operations, more and more requirements will be required. Um, and then on top of that, we have mission workflows in the authorities. So there's 7 different mission stages, and you can set different requirements. So different forms and checklists that can trigger at those different stages. So you
Okay.
can literally build out standardized thing for operating visual line of sight, and then everyone who goes to use that will have to conform to those requirements and have to follow those forms and checklists.
Okay, excellent. And none of these operations are one size fits all. So you build in
Yep.
these layers to kind of tune those procedures, if you will, for each
Yeah,
mission
correct.
and pilot.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of the things people don't realize, is it gets extremely layered. So yeah, so we'll do authorities at the sort of regulatory level. Then you could have an authority for like an operation type. So, for example, surveying. Surveying might have a specific induction or some specific surveying training that needs to be done. That would kind of be another authority. Um, and then all the way down to the individual UAS sort of platform. So you can start to build up really complex web of requirements from very simple elements to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, gosh, not only are all missions not alike or different, but certainly the platforms you may use, even for one given mission, may vary
Yeah.
significantly. I just remember, John McBride when he was training on Autel's I think it was called the Dragonfly, the Dragon. It's a really big eVTOL fixed wing aircraft, and
Uh,
you know what I mean? Like flying one of those is so different than flying like a quadcopter in terms of aerodynamics and things you have to think about. So for companies to think ahead and build that into their workflows and make sure people are trained on the platform they're going to use, it seems like very obvious, but you can see where you're just busy in the middle of everything. Maybe you don't have that in your process, but you've kind of make people think about it. And I love that you have these checklists. So let's talk about scaling operations next, because once you set those protocols, those standards across your business, you've got companies and clients rolling in. Now you've got to scale. So what's that next phase?
yeah. So typically, when you're starting to scale, generally speaking, you'll have someone will be responsible. That's what we found, that the most successful companies that scale efficiently, have someone who's dedicated in that role, and that's their focus. Is okay. We've got some standards now. I need to roll it out and replicate it across different, business units or different geographies. And then the challenge becomes more about efficiency. So how do you start to really make the processes as efficient as possible? So because when you've got 100 people doing a really inefficient process, that is not good. So
Yeah.
you obviously want to make it as simple and as fast as possible. And that's where we've got things like our field app. So using those workflows you build, they go through to the field app. So in the field, the pilots literally just follow the bouncing ball of what they're sort of being told to do from that workflow. And it sort of makes that whole process super efficient, and just removes a lot of the roadblocks and issues when scaling up.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, these three things we're talking about, the standardization, the scaling, and we're going to talk about sustainment or sustaining operations next. Those are really more focused on leadership, if you will, management. Like this person we're talking
Yep.
about here, maybe this one dedicated person that helps scale the program for the business. Typically, I think people will give them the title of program manager, like the UAS
Yep.
program manager, our pause program manager. So when this person, the program manager, is using your scaling, the scaling portions of FlyFreely, um, what options do they have to delegate? Because, this one person can't do everything, right? Like you said, there might be
Yeah,
hundreds of
correct.
pilots out there, hundreds of operations going at the same time. They're in a position where they have to manage it, but they can't be tactical necessarily. What tools does Fly Freely give that person from a delegation or otherwise standpoint?
Yes. Yeah, a few different tools. So one of the first ones we built was around conformance monitoring. So, you know, you've set some standards. You basically have to start to enforce them. So one of the ways of doing that is essentially taking the flight logs, doing analysis on those flight logs, and seeing, is what you planned actually what you did, or did you go outside the rules? Go outside sort of company policies. Um, but then you can't, go through literally hundreds of flight logs. It's just not possible. So automating that whole process is what the conformance monitoring tool does, and just alerts both the pilot and the program manager to any issues that might be arising. The second one we have is the ability to delegate out different responsibilities to senior remote pilots. So that essentially enables or frees up that sort of program manager or chief pilot, however the organization structured their program, to focus on those high level things like, getting waivers or colors or things of that, or investigating new technologies, and really pushing down that sort of day to day to other sort of senior pilots that might be more geographically located better than they are.
All right, cool. And I think if I recall correctly, you guys have a tasks view also that provides a summary of everything that needs to be updated or has not yet been completed. So really from soup to nuts for this manager of upfront during the operations, enabling, other people to take the reins and then afterwards to analyze, well, how did that go? So great stuff there. And then you support other realities in this space. Sometimes shared resources are shared within an organization, whether it's drones, UAS, whether it's people. Uh, how do you support those realities in terms of people, UAS, or even authorizations for those managers?
Yeah, so one of the things we find when people start to scale is it gets a bit messy, right? You think it's all going to be nice and structured, and then all of a sudden you're borrowing drones from this business unit and people from over here pulling in external contractors. I need a COA to operate here. So that's the realities, right? If you're experiencing that, don't worry, it's kind of normal. So we've built in a few tools to help on those different situations. So the first one is with the people. The system's been built to be multi-organizational, so someone can work for multiple different organizations, and their flight history will travel with them. So we call this the logbook for life. So no matter where you go, that company you're working for will always have access to it, and so will you. The other thing we do is allow sharing of resources, so sharing of UAS batteries, things of that nature between organizations. So typically find this is when you want to use something for the first time, a UAS that you haven't used before, you want to try it out. You can share it across, and then the big one we do, which is super interesting, is around essentially allowing people to operate under your waivers or COAs, or borrow someone else's waivers or COAs. So the way that works is essentially that organization will share you that authority, and then anyone in the organization will have to meet all the pilot, UAS, and follow the workflow that's dictated by that authority. So it becomes a really efficient way, again, to get started on particularly complex operations, without having to sort of go through all those, jumping through all those hoops yourself.
Yeah, I mean, not only does that help you scale your operations, but I imagine also that last prong of sustaining them, this logbook for life. I love this idea. I mean, I was in the United States Air Force. I know pilots had their logbook, a lot of them
Yep.
were pen and paper at the time, like you said, and with the transfers and having to physically carry something around, or if you're bouncing between organizations. Man, that's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about other realities. I mean, I think oftentimes you'll have this amazing, let's just say, program manager or chief pilot, and then maybe they get another opportunity and they leave. A lot of times, that program, just because that person has the corporate knowledge, the minute they
Yep.
walk out the door, it's gone. How does FlyFreely help alleviate that?
Yeah, so and this is really coming back again to those sort of authorities and workflows that we were talking about earlier. So really, when you're building those, you're actually baking in all this knowledge. So what are the requirements like? What are the workflows like? What are the forms like? And then splitting those out for the different types of operations and things that you're doing. So anyone else who comes along, it's actually quite logical, what it all means and where it all fits. Um, and then also being able to have them delegate out responsibilities to other people. Typically what will happen is one of those senior people who have had those responsibilities will step up into that role. So it's not a foreign experience being exposed to kind of all the behind the scenes sort of dirty laundry that the program manager does, but the pilots, operators don't actually see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not glamorous work by any means, but how critical is that? I know just in my time in the Air Force, and this is like an analogy, being a head lawyer of an office, people would leave all the time. That's just the nature of the business. Every couple years you would rotate to a new assignment. If you didn't have continuity books, we called them, man, you're in a world of hurt. You're just, reinventing the wheel,
Yep.
researching that same issue over and over again. And to have a system where from day one you're building this historical and corporate knowledge in one place, regardless of where people go, I think is really key. And that includes contractors, like you said, can be incorporated.
Yep.
That includes enterprise systems that can be integrated, I believe, into your software as well. So a client's systems can start plugging into what you're doing as well for a particular mission. And I think that's also a great bridge now to talk about this next, let's just call it triad of capabilities that you bring to the table. And these are more focused on the operator or the pilot, him or herself, this mission life cycle, if you will, the plan, the execute, and the reconcile aspect of your software. So let's talk about planning first. Tell us what FlyFreely can bring to the table before someone even flies.
Yeah, so there's really two ways, again, reflecting the different use cases we've seen. So we have what we call our Office app, which is our web-based app. And that's where operators can go in and do really quite detailed planning. So it typically tends to be for the more complex operations. You'll go in there, and so things in there, you'll have Lance authorizations, you'll have NOTAMs, all sorts of tools to essentially communicate what you're doing. But we also have the Field app, which works on any mobile device for, as it kind of says, for in the field. So you can do essentially simple mission planning in the field, and giving you the kind of the best of both worlds, depending on sort of the way you operate and the requirements of those missions. So we're hearing some companies now are moving fully towards, they want everything pre-planned in the office with the Office app. Others are like, no, you just, when you turn up on site, you get out the phone, you do a quick plan and off you go. So again, it's different, all these different use cases you have to deal with and cater for. And so we've got various options to help with either of those, depending on which way you want to go.
Yeah, and I just want to foot stomp this so we don't like gloss over it. You said, from the authorization standpoint up front, you can get Lance authorizations through FlyFreely, which is awesome. You guys have plugged in with the FAA like that. NOTAMs, notice to airmen, formerly air missions, formerly airmen, back to airmen, and controlled zone data, etc. But you didn't mention this, which I think is super cool. You guys have a built-in drawing tool for this mission planning. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so have a variety of tools to help, not only draw exactly where you're going to be operating, but adding in a whole bunch of other layers of contextual information. So, adding in no-fly zones, danger areas. We've even built a corridor tool, so that's particularly for long linear assets. So you makes that whole process really easy. And then all the way through to dropping in markers around, where will the pilot be positioned? Where will any visual observers be positioned? So you have pretty much a really comprehensive picture. You can share with everybody, everyone in the crew knows exactly what's going on, who needs to be where. And then we can also import KML files, which you may have, and then auto basically build that sort of drawing from your KML file. So again, everyone operates slightly differently. So built in several different ways of achieving the same end goal.
Sometimes on the go, a mission needs to happen very quickly. How can someone kind of populate the FlyFreely, let's just say field app, uh, when they're like literally on the fly?
Yeah, so literally just pull it out. We just built in a new mode called Instant Mission, and as it again, we're pretty straightforward on our descriptions on what it does. Literally pull out the phone, hit one button which is an airspace check, another button which is fly. That is the simplest, fastest way to plan and get going. So literally within 30 seconds, I think you can do that. And obviously having the airspace checks as well in that process.
Wow, that is amazing. And I imagine most people plan, right? Because as we always used to say in the Air Force, hope is not a plan. And just hoping it's all going to go great. But sometimes for whatever reason, maybe someone didn't go in the Office app. Maybe they didn't use the Field app in advance for whatever reason. For compliance purposes or just even internal purposes for your organization. Can you retrospectively document that mission other than just pulling a flight log?
Yeah, so we have a system that we've built that will not just take the flight log, but then add on a whole bunch of other information related to the mission itself. So it makes it super easy for anyone to build anything retrospectively. And this becomes particularly useful for any sort of historical operations that you want to get into the system. That's a convenient way of doing it. But yeah, it does happen, particularly in sort of emergency type scenarios where you just don't have time to plan. You just got to get up, fly, get going. So having again mechanisms to help with that is another thing we try to do.
Yeah, well, let's talk about execution now because I think we're already a little bit in that realm. And you're kind of raising this issue that I think is a pain point for a lot of pilots. It's paperwork. It's checking those boxes. I know that's one of the big issues pilots have out in the field is they have to spend time filling out paperwork. How can you help there?
Yeah, so again, coming back from those authorities we built earlier, those checklists will start to flow through. So literally, you're just going through and following the checklists that pop up, and those checklists are fully customizable by the program manager, um, and so it makes it super simple for the pilot to know what to do. And then we've also got some offline capability. So this is another sort of key issue that crops up is don't always have internet connectivity. So have various options to enable you to both plan and execute offline as well.
Well, that is key, whether it's you're just in a remote area and there's no, internet, to be able to do that offline is really awesome that you can do that. All right, let's talk about you've planned it, you've flown it, and now you're back in the office after all this is done. And this is, I think, the phase you guys call reconcile or reconciliation, what you do back in that office. Data entry is the bane of everyone's existence, not just pilots. Let's be real about it. I call it in my business. I call it admin, and I despise it. I think most people do.
Yep.
How do you guys decrease that administrative burden on the pilot when they get back in that office?
Yeah, the key part of this whole process is the flight log. So we spend a lot of time coming up with ways to retrieve those flight logs from different OEMs platforms, because that has all the critical data around time, as well as any secondary sort of information around batteries and things of that nature. And we've got different options to do that. So with our field app, that could be side-loaded onto Android devices, so we can actually pull the flight log directly from the file system on the controller. And depending on the manufacturer, if they've got some cloud syncing capabilities, we can tap those. So for example, Skydio and Drone Deploy, we currently support from a cloud point of view. Essentially trying to automate that whole process. And so we'll even connect the flight logs directly to the pre-planned mission, or we'll actually group the different logs together and suggest that this is a mission. So you can essentially build that mission. It's kind of that retrospective approach. So you could build a mission after you've kind of completed your operation.
Well, I know part of the admin oftentimes revolves around maybe reporting an incident. Possibly there's a maintenance issue. How does FlyFreely software address those two things?
Yeah, so on the maintenance side, we have essentially a serviceability question that can be triggered in the field app. So and this is a really good practice to get into, is the pilot, once they're done flying for the day, they answer a simple question: is this drone still serviceable? Right? Very simple question. And in that process, they can say, hey, no, it's actually had a hard landing. And then that will essentially raise a maintenance ticket when they get back in the office and sync everything up. And then that will start the sort of maintenance process. So they can have a look at it. You know, whoever's in charge of maintenance can have a look, and maybe there's no problem and it gets returned to service. If not, then it might get taken for further investigation.
Oh,
So yeah, so
and then I
that's
assume that ties into the maintenance aspect as well.
yeah, correct. So then that feeds the whole sort of maintenance process, and then we built a whole maintenance system down to sort of component level. So every UAS in the platform is built from components, so down to individual motors, speed controllers, flight controllers, all of those sorts of things. So then you can bring those as individual tasks into the maintenance when you perform maintenance. So literally clean motor 3, clean motor 4, down to that sort of hyper granular level, which is what you'll need when you start to do more complex operations.
Yeah, I mean, replace the the rotors, and things like
Yep.
this. So the propellers, the props. We have a great question from Rebus Mar out there in watching Viewland here. Good morning. I'm a UAS instructor for a community in MS, Missouri. Missouri? I'm asking, I'm not sure. I think that's Missouri or Mississippi. I'm not sure. In any event, they're in the United States and they're wondering if your software could be beneficial for helping my school get more organized and structured as we expand our program. So, this is a great question to talk about. It sounds like this works great for energy clients. That's the world you came from, David.
Yeah.
But what other potential clients, schools, academics, public safety? I mean, can this software work in all of these other markets?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, in those scenarios, the requirements are probably a lot less than going on a, oil and gas site. So you can configure it to have minimal checks and balances, right? So it's flexible to switch between both worlds. And yeah, we have a whole bunch of different schools and universities that use the platform. Particularly, they really like that logbook for life. So the students can actually get some exposure to sort of a commercial tool, log their hours, build up a bit of a professional profile, and then they kind of can take that with them once they're done.
And it is Mississippi. I apologize. So that's awesome. Great question, Rebus. Thank you so much. It actually was not one that I had or was thinking about, but it's really a perfect one to frame this up. And now we know that FlyFreely and David are already working with schools. So please reach out to him afterwards to learn
Yeah.
more. And I'll tell you what, having been a professor myself, both at the Air Force Academy and CU Pueblo. Habits matter and they start early. And so when you're training for something like this or teaching, to get students in the habit of planning a mission, to get them in the habit of having a logbook for life and tracking their own accomplishments and the authorities they were able to receive and the missions they were able to do, awesome to do that from day one and to be able to take that with them. So good on you, David, for doing that and working with schools. And I hope you guys connect after the show. But let's talk about kind of what's next, right? We're getting close to
Yeah.
the end of the show here, and you've got so much going on. We already briefly talked about the fact that you've entered into the U.S. market. You already got that FAA approval to be a Lance provider as a UAS service supplier. So that's awesome. People can go right on and get their airspace approvals through FlyFreely, through that Lance system. What else should we be looking out for on your roadmap, David?
Yeah. This industry is so dynamic. So
Yes.
a couple of things that are really we're getting a lot of feedback from customers about. So the first one is a lot of customers are now sort of getting quite large operations. So, in the hundreds of pilots and UAS operating. So conflicts between uncrewed aircraft and crewed aircraft are now becoming like more probable than not. So this is now rising up as a significant issue. So we're starting to implement a system we're calling localized NOTAMs. So it essentially allows asset operators or site owners the ability to declare sort of localized NOTAMs. So it can be like, we've got some helicopter operations happening here, and then all the other drone pilots can see that. Any contractors can also do the same. So everyone's basically building up a bit of a common operating picture.
Oh my gosh, so
And
it's like crowdsourced. It's almost like, I don't know if you use Waze when you're in your car in the United States, but like, you're driving down the road and it'll say, there's a pothole over there. Is it still there? And you can click yes, it's still there. Are you saying like pilots out there can kind of build this picture for other people? Like, hey, there are helicopter operations here that aren't otherwise documented.
yeah, so it'll early stages, it'll be kind of confined to the organization that's submitted into,
Okay,
because
gotcha. So
they'll
internally,
control
like
that.
the 100 pilots in, let's just say Chevron's program, they're the ones that will see that.
Correct. Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
So it's localized currently, just to give that super basic layer of information of what's going on. And then obviously the other big sort of elephant in the room is Part 108,
Yeah.
and what that's going to bring. So
Overdue
when
yet
yeah,
again, despite the Trump executive order. I think we're 2 days overdue today.
I was going to say, yeah, isn't the 30 days up by now?
Yeah, it's up.
But so as you can see in the particularly in the ARC report that was um, published many years ago now,
Yep.
that there's a whole bunch of requirements that are going to sit in the background there around, airworthiness, all this maintenance issues, crew qualifications, currency, all these things you're going to need. We've built all that already in the Australian market, where BV loss is currently a frequently done activity. We've got basically a bunch of those tools in place already. So really waiting for that to come out, and then we'll sort of tweak what's required under the Part 108 rule, and then we should be in a really good position to support Part 108 almost straight away.
That's awesome, and I know, you're working with consulting partners as well to help streamline their customers' entry into this BVLOS world that we hope will come soon to the United States, including in the drone in a box, arena. That when I hear DIB, I think enterprise, I think primarily public safety, and so I know you've got all of that going on. We are kind of at our time here. I know you've got more than this going on, David, but I want to make sure before we close out today that you can tell everybody, where they might be able to see you in person possibly next, maybe at the next show you might be attending, or otherwise how they can learn more about Fly Freely and how, of course, they can reach you.
Yeah, I mean, most reliable way, flyfreely.io. Go to the website. But apart from that, LinkedIn, and then Commercial UAV Expo coming up, UAS Summit back in North Dakota and later in the year, and going to Indonesia for a working group meeting with regards to JARIS and the group riding the Sora for more complex drone operations. So all over the world, it's good fun. Meet lots of interesting people like yourself, Dawn, and get these amazing opportunities to talk to a whole bunch of new people. So and I really appreciate your time and efforts giving me some platform here.
Well, first of all, thank you. And it's been such a pleasure to learn more about what you do at Fly Freely, what your inspiration was from kind of those hardships you personally experienced out in the field, and how you continue to evolve the company with the industry, beyond visual line of sight, one to many, drone in a box, all of these things, and of course the feedback from clients that you're getting, working with academia, working with enterprise customers, public safety, all of them. Energy, of course, is a big one. Just saw you there at Energy Drone in Houston as well. That was so cool. So great to get to know you, great to get to know FlyFreely a little bit. And hopefully, everybody out there, if you have questions, you have comments, you want to follow up, reach out to David at flyfreely.io or through LinkedIn, as he said. And I'm sure he'll be happy to discuss with you how you guys can collaborate. So that's all she wrote. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Las Vegas in a couple months, David. So everybody out there, stay tuned because we're going to do, I think it's our 5th annual Flash Mob Networking Happy Hour in Vegas on Labor Day. So Monday night, come a little early, join us for the fun. It's going to be the best party you're going to have all week long. And the next up for me, David, is the AVSI Drone and AAM Policy Symposium in the DC area at the end of the month, at least on the drone front. So looking forward to seeing some of you there. We'll be doing a full crew live stream from there. Check it out. And I'm off to San Diego for Edge and Security and Esri. So follow us on Autonomy Global and you'll see some of this amazing content. And that's all she wrote for today. Thank you so much, David. We are out here.